Welcome to RankLens. Today we count down the top 10 longest crewed space missions in history. Space is unforgiving. Radiation, microgravity, isolation. It tests the human body in ways we're only beginning to understand. But for a select handful of astronauts and cosmonauts, the challenge wasn't just to survive in orbit. It was to survive longer than anyone had before us. Today, we're counting down the 10 longest crewed spaceflight missions in history. From Cold War endurance records to modern ISS marathons, these 10 voyages pushed human physiology to its absolute limits. We're starting at number 10 and building to a single mission that still stands unbeaten after 3 decades. Are you ready? Let's go. At number 10, Sergei Krikalev logged 311 days aboard Mir, and his story is a reminder that spaceflight exists within the chaos of history. Krikalev launched in May 1991 as a Soviet citizen. But the Soviet Union didn't last that long. By the time his mission was scheduled to end that December, the USSR had completely dissolved. The geopolitical earthquake meant his mission got extended multiple times. Political turmoil on Earth forced NASA and the Russians to negotiate Krikalev's safe return, stranding him in orbit far longer than planned. When he finally touched down in March 1992, he'd earned a dark historical nickname, the Last Soviet Citizens. He launched as one nation and returned to another. That 311 days was a record for its time, but it was also a symbol of how fragile the geopolitical foundations of spaceflight really are. At number 9, Yuri Romanenko spent 326 days aboard Mir in 1987, and he holds a special place in space history as a world record holder. Romanenko's 1987 mission shattered the existing record for continuous human spaceflight at the time. Soviet physicians were watching his every move. They tracked his cardiovascular response, his bone density loss, his muscle atrophy, all the ways weightlessness was reshaping his body day by day. That data was gold for the Soviet program. Understanding how the human body adapted to a year-long absence of gravity wasn't just scientific curiosity. It validated the idea that the Soviets could push even further. Romanenko's mission proved it was possible, and his data inspired the Soviet program to chase even longer durations. He set a standard that would eventually be broken, but not easily. At number 8, Christina Koch logged 328 days aboard the International Space Station, and she holds a record that matters deeply, the longest single spaceflight by any woman. Koch's mission ran from March 2019 to February 2020, and NASA made an explicit choice to extend her stay. This wasn't random. They wanted female-specific physiological data, how a woman's bone density, cardiovascular system, and muscle respond to a year in microgravity. During her stay, Koch and fellow astronaut Jessica Meir made history together, the first all-female spacewalk. 2 women floating outside the ISS, tethered to nothing but training and skill. That moment and those 328 days weren't just about personal achievement. They were about building a foundation for future female astronauts and proving that long-duration spaceflight data can't be one gender only. Koch changed what the numbers look like. At number 7, Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko spent 340 days together aboard the ISS in a mission that was designed from the start to answer one big question: can humans survive a year in space? This wasn't just another rotation. NASA and Russia conceived it as an explicit human health and physiology study, a full 12-month experiment with 2 subjects and 1 goal. But here's what made it truly legendary. Scott Kelly's identical twin brother Mark stayed on Earth. NASA built the landmark twin study around them. While Scott floated in orbit, Mark remained ground-side, his genetics identical, his environment completely different. The data they collected on bone loss, radiation exposure, muscle atrophy, vision changes directly shaped NASA's planning for deep space missions to the Moon and Mars. Their 340 days wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a scientific blueprint for humanity's future beyond Earth orbit. At number 6, Mark Vande Hei logged a 35 days aboard the ISS, the longest single spaceflight by an American astronaut. Vande Hei's mission ran from April 2021 to March 2022, and NASA deliberately extended his stay to push beyond the typical 6-month ISS rotation. The goal was clear: gather more critical data on how the human body endures a year plus in microgravity. But his return became a geopolitical moment. In March 2022, as Russian forces invaded Ukraine, Vande Hei returned aboard a Soyuz capsule alongside 2 Russian cosmonauts, a reminder that space cooperation exists in a world of terrestrial conflict. Despite the tensions on Earth, the mission succeeded. Those 355 days proved that an American could match the Soviet-era endurance records. Vande Hei's quiet achievement stands as a testament to what one human body, properly monitored and supported, can endure in the void. At number 5, Vladimir Titov and Musa Manarov achieved something that changed space history forever. They became the first humans ever to spend a full year in space, a 366 days aboard Mir. This was November 1987 through December 1988, the height of the Soviet space program's ambitions. A full calendar year, 12 months without setting foot on solid ground. No one had ever done it before. The Soviets had pushed beyond 6 months, beyond 8 months, and now they'd shattered into a new realm entirely. The medical data alone was revolutionary, proof that the human skeleton wouldn't collapse, that the heart wouldn't fail, that consciousness could remain sharp for a full cycle of seasons while drifting in orbit. Their record stood for several years before it was broken decisively. But Titov and Manarov's achievement wasn't about rankings. It was about proving a fundamental truth: humans can live in space, truly live for longer than a year. At number 4, Sergei Prokopyev, Dmitry Petelin, and Frank Rubio logged 371 days aboard the ISS, but their extra time in orbit wasn't planned. In September 2022, their assigned return capsule, Soyuz MS-22, developed a coolant leak, and it became unusable. Suddenly, 3 astronauts and cosmonauts who expected a standard 6-month mission faced an extended stay. NASA and Roscosmos had to improvise. Soyuz MS-22 was sent home empty, an unmanned lifeboat returning by itself. A replacement capsule, Soyuz MS-23, launched uncrewed to the station and docked, waiting for them. That mission extension pushed their stay far beyond typical ISS rotation windows. By the time Prokopyev, Petelin, and Rubio finally left in September 2023, they'd logged 371 days, a testament to human flexibility and orbital logistics. What could have been a disaster became a triumph of adaptation. At number 3, Oleg Kononenko and Nikolai Chub completed their ISS mission with 374 days ACA in orbit, and Kononenko's achievement transcends even that number. By the time they returned in September 2024, Kononenko had made history. He became the first human being to accumulate over 1,000 total days in orbit across his entire career. Think about that. 1,000 days. Nearly 3 years of his life spent floating in weightlessness across multiple missions to Mir and the ISS. His crewmate Nikolai Chub shared the journey, and together they completed their stint. But the record books now have Kononenko's name at the top for cumulative time, a recognition that spans decades of spaceflight, from the final years of Mir through the ISS era into the 2020s. He surpassed every cosmonaut and astronaut who flew before him. His 374 days on this final mission was part of a life dedicated to understanding what it means to live beyond Earth's atmosphere. At number 2, Sergei Avdeyev spent 380 days aboard Mir in 1998-1999, a mission that was notable not just for its duration, but for what it proved about time itself. This was Avdeyev's third mission to the station. By this point, Mir was aging. The Cold War was over. The space race had transformed into something slower, stranger, more scientific. Avdeyev's extended stay gave scientists something remarkable to calculate: actual relativistic time dilation. Because of his speed in orbit, moving at roughly 17,500 miles per hour, time literally passed differently for him than for people on Earth. It's not science fiction. It's Einstein. By the numbers, Avdeyev aged about 0.02 seconds less than people on the ground. Tiny, but real. His stay fell in Mir's final years, just before the station's 2001 deorbit and the ISS era's ascendance. Avdeyev's 380 days remind us that spaceflight isn't just about endurance. It's about the fundamental physics of velocity and time. At number 1, Valeri Polyakov holds a record that has stood unbeaten for over 3 decades, for 337 days aboard Mir. This wasn't a rotation or a scientific campaign. This was a mission designed to answer the ultimate question: can a human survive long enough to travel to Mars and back? The Soviet Union had collapsed by 1994, but the dream of Mars endured. Polyakov launched in January 1994 and didn't return until March 1995, 14.5 months of weightlessness. Every system in his body was stressed. His bones thinned, his muscles atrophied. His cardiovascular system was pushed to the brink. And yet, when his Soyuz descended to Kazakhstan, something astonishing happened. He walked out unaided from the landing capsule. Doctors expected severe deconditioning. They expected a man who could barely move. Instead, Polyakov walked. His 437 days proved that humans could endure Mars-length voyages if training, nutrition, and exercise were rigorous enough. That record still stands today. No one has surpassed it in nearly 30 years. Space endurance isn't a trophy. It's a data point about human limits and possibilities. From Krikalev's accidental year in orbit during the USSR's collapse to Polyakov's deliberate Mars simulation marathon, these 10 missions tell us something vital. Humans are far more adaptable than we once believed. Every extended mission generates new physiological insights: bone density curves, cardiovascular responses, radiation tolerance thresholds. These aren't abstract numbers. They're the foundation for every future deep space mission, whether to the Moon, Mars, or beyond. And perhaps more importantly, they remind us that human space exploration isn't just about individual records. It's about pushing past our own gravity, literally and figuratively, to understand what's possible when we refuse to turn back. And that's the top 10 longest crewed space missions in history. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe to RankLens for more.